David's Austin, I think, but that's all good. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God, by whom the meek are guided in judgment and light rises up in darkness for all, grant us in all our doubts and uncertainties the grace to know what you would have us do, that the spirit of wisdom may save us, and that in your light we may see light, and in your straight path may not stumble, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Peace to you all. Welcome. Thank you for making time to be here this morning. It's our intention in the next 30 minutes to give a brief rehearsal. This is the fourth in a series of 4 presentations on the proposed ground lease for parking lot C. We've got several people in the room that had been involved, but one person that I failed to acknowledge last week that I wanted to name this week, I haven't seen him yet, so I don't know if he's actually in the room, is Scott Hoffman's in the back. Scott Hoffman was a senior warden, I want to say 3 years back now, maybe a little less, but 3 years back I believe it was, and on his watch, some initial conversations were begun with respect to parking lot C and its lease. It's our intention, though, in these 30 minutes to give a little rehearsal on the history of that parcel of land, introduce the committee that's been presiding over the last 2.5 years of the conversations surrounding its lease, to give a little bit about the heart of the lease itself, its detail, and then finally to look at what's forward, how decisions will be made. There'll be time just before that last part for there to be questions of clarification from those that have gathered. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Ellen Wright. Ellen, you back here? Come right on over. Ellen has been chairing the third-party partnership working group. She'll introduce that group to you and then take us through some of the history.
Good morning. Oh, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Well, with the royal wedding on everybody's mind, rather than wear a fascinator this morning, I was trying to figure out how to be a fascinator. And but in point of fact, I find legal documents sort of dry. But with that, we will forge on. Now, let's see, I have... as you all know, we've been working for about 18 months as a committee on trying to enter into a ground lease agreement for parking lot C. This is the list of people in our committee, most of whom are seated in front of me. Would you all stand up briefly, please? Should you care for me to revisit any of these slides so you can look at all of our particulars, I will. But in the interest of time, I'm going to breeze through it. But I will say that the members of our committee have collectively a lot of expertise in real estate development and in real estate law. It's been my great privilege to work with them, and it continues to be a great privilege to work with them. I've learned a ton. So you all can read what you will. I'm not going to read these for you, except to say that Barry Smith is not with us this morning. Barry is not a parishioner here, so his is not a face you will regularly see here. But he's been a dedicated and faithful member of this group and has brought a lot of good advice and expertise. Barry, as Timothy just alluded, was introduced to us by Scott Hoffman. So we are grateful for that introduction some years ago. We were willing to hire Barry as a consultant, but he has done this entirely voluntarily. Brooks is who you should, Brooks and Charlie Cook or who you should direct your legal questions to at the end of this presentation. And Katie will handle the fallout. A bit of background for those of you who either don't know it or haven't thought about it lately. This is not germane to parking lot C, but it's germane to the driving force behind so many of these discussions, which is parking. In 1958, we acquired 2 buildings that were right on parking lot A. In other words, we had no parking then, and we acquired these buildings in 1958 and tore them down in order to create parking lot A. The Commerce Union Bank building was bought in 1991 and is now the annex and parking lot B. In 2001, we purchased an ugly building. That's my editorial remark, but I don't fear intelligent contradiction, as they say. We purchased an ugly building from Southern Baptist Convention and later demolished it. So that left us with parking lot C and a dog leg towards the 810 building that's known as parking lot D, but for the purposes of this morning's conversation, that's going to all be referred to as parking lot C. In 2014, Scott brought in Barry Smith just to update the vestry on what was going on in our immediate vicinity. It was clear at that point, of course, that Nashville was on the move, and we wanted to know, the vestry wanted to know at that point how that affected us. About 2016, I want to say the fall of 2016, the vestry created the third-party partnership working group with a 2-pronged charge. I will read this. The first being to hear, receive, process, and make recommendations to the vestry regarding proposals brought to Christ Church regarding the development or redevelopment of Christ Church property. The working group would represent the interests of the dean and vestry to developers, and number 2, to develop and prepare for bid, if it may be, proposals for the development or redevelopment of parking lot C and or parking lot B, the annex, according to parameters that are being developed by the Strategic Planning Committee. It's not my intention this morning to remind you of the conclusions of the Strategic Planning Committee. You all can have either heard them ad nauseum at this point, or you may refer to the Christ Church website. We were approached by HRI initially because they were interested in buying the 810 building. The 810 building being the building right across 9th Avenue, where currently we rent basement space to house our youth on Sunday mornings. They wanted to convert the 810 building into a hotel, and they were interested in parking lot C because they needed parking for their hotel. For various reasons, the 810 building deal didn't work out, and their broker said, well, they'd be really interested in your parking lot anyway for new construction. So who is HRI? Historic Renovations or Restorations Incorporated. This is their most recent project in Nashville. You'll recognize this as the old Andrew Jackson apartment building on 7th. James Robertson. Why did I say Andrew Jackson? James Robertson apartment building on 7th. And they are a firm based in New Orleans with a 35-year track record, largely redeveloping historic buildings for commercial, not for real estate, for residential and hotel conversions, although they are engaged in new building as well. They currently have about $600 million worth of investment going on nationwide, worth of development going on nationwide, and this project in Nashville opened, had a soft opening in December, but is officially opened now, and it's pretty neat. I've been through it, if you all, and they have a nice coffee shop that you can go to before church. So, were we approached by other people? Yes. We were approached by Southwest Value Partners, who developed the Lifeway property, and we were approached by Gresham Smith, who were involved in the development of the new convention center site. We actually set up meetings with both of those entities, and both of those entities further canceled the meetings. In the case of Southwest Value Partners, they canceled 2 meetings. So we did have some interest from other developers, but who apparently lost interest before they talked to us. Did we go and solicit other bids? No, and we can talk about that later if you want to, but we've been through that before. One reason being that these people really wanted to work with us and have stuck with us now for 18 months. We have several rough drafts. We are several rough drafts into an agreement to enter into a ground lease for new construction on this property, parking lot C, that would be a mixed-use hotel, condominium, and parking. The parking is what we all want to know about. That is, we will have the use of 80 parking spaces, all entered from 9th Avenue, exclusively for our use 24/7. They will belong to us. The remainder of the hotel and condominium access will be from 8th Avenue, so there will not be overlap for the entry to the parking lot for the hotel and the entry to the parking lot for our church. The terms of the ground lease are 99 years with a possible 25-year extension. The terms will be renegotiated at market values after 75 years. For the first 60 years, I think it is, or maybe it's for the first 75, there's a built-in rent increase of 7.5% every 5 years. This is the net value of the lease over the projected life of the lease. The vestry is going to consider this tomorrow night. The ground lease allows for an 18-month permitting period, although it actually specifies 12 to 18 months. 18 months would be at the outside. The powers that be who understand the real estate market in Nashville now expect that it may take 18 months. Then, after the permitting period has ended, the construction period can take up to 2 years. Our rent would begin the minute the construction is finished. This is somewhat of a 3D of the parking. And for those of you, including me for this particular, I can show you a little bit what's going on here. But this is the 9th Avenue garage entry. So that lower level you see here is subterranean. This is street level. This is the ramp down. This little box right there is an elevator. This space right here is not drawn in, but is a stairwell. So there would be a dedicated elevator and stairwell into our parking, a down ramp off of 9th. This is where the down ramp goes. And I'm trying, so it comes in here and then goes down. So this is sub-level 1. And then there's sort of a partial sub-level 2 as you go down. This is our exclusive parking that we would own. During the construction period, so we lease out parking lot B and parking lot C during the week, and we net about $80,000 a year from that. We would be reimbursed for that during the construction phase. The vestry has determined that the rent from the ground lease would cover deferred maintenance and really the care and feeding of our historic building. There's a lot of deferred maintenance here. It doesn't take scrutiny to find it. And so this is how the vestry has determined that this rent will be used. We consulted some other parishes as well as a representative of the National Church by the name of Canon Lang Lowry. He's out of Atlanta. He's a former banker who spends a lot of time traveling the country and advising parishes how to best deal with land that they may own. He did not come and talk to us, but he and I had several conversations, and our committee discussed his input, which was to say, sometimes do this, sometimes do that. Some parishes I encourage to sell their property outright. Others I agree should enter into a long-term ground lease. He thought that we seemed to be on the right track. We also looked at similar joint ventures that had been entered into by the cathedral in Philadelphia, which was really on the way out, actually. They were facing having to close their doors. And in this photograph, you see a high-rise that saved their church. They have some significant differences from us, namely they're not a parish, but at any rate. Trinity Cathedral, Houston, is an extremely wealthy parish that predates Texas's being a state, actually. And they've done some very innovative things as joint ventures in their urban setting. They're in the middle of downtown Houston. St. Michael and All Angels, Dallas, St. James Cathedral, Toronto, and Timothy, you said the cathedral in Austin?
Yes, St. David's Austin.
St. David's Austin were also consulted. I might make a couple more points. Other possibilities that are covered by the ground lease. If we so choose, we can ask them to pay upfront 10 years of rent. That's one option. We could sell this property outright. The current market value is estimated or has been appraised at $6.2 million for an outright sale, but then we would lose our parking and we would lose control of the property. Affordable housing is not off the table. Affordable housing is tied to tax credits, and HRI has historically made that part of their projects nationwide. The tax credits are a little bit up in the air right now, and we don't know exactly what will happen with their decision to incorporate affordable housing into their residential units, but we do know that it's still a possibility. At the end of 99 years, we will still own the property and anything that remains on it. Can the lease be sold in the meantime? Yes. It could be sold by the tenant. However, the terms of the lease would remain in effect for whoever bought it. I think those are the basics, and Ellen is probably going to remind everyone about what our parking options are under when construction is going on, or now if you choose.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellen Coleman. So parking, right? It's a hot topic. Currently, this is what we have. This is our situation. We have 65 spots in Lot A, 79 spots in Lot C. 65 is Lots A and B. 15 over here on 9th, about 25 on Broadway, and about 25 free spots on Sundays at the 9th Avenue South in between the Frist and the Federal Building. Our other options, yes. Oh, yeah, is it on?
No.
Oh, hold on, got it.
That's it.
Does that work?
And then push
Just that little
this.
button? Haha, thanks. So we have some other options too. Right now, the Frist has generously given us a large discount on 50 vouchers every Sunday that are available during the week. There's a little, on the little pew rack right here, across from the reception desk, there is a little rack that has some cards in it that has vouchers attached to it. So if you want to pick those up on Sundays or during the week, you can. All you have to do is take it over to the Frist and put it in their little machine, and then you can park for free. And we have 50 of those available every Sunday currently. Our other option, which will start in September, SP Plus, which currently runs our Lot C right now, we will have more than 50 available spots on Sunday mornings right behind the Customs House, which is just over here at 8th and Broadway. It's a short walk across Broadway, but that creates a lot of extra things. So the next question is always, okay, so great, we're gonna lose 79 spots on Lot C. How are we gonna make that up in the future over the next 3 to 3.5 years? And when I call people with parking lots to say, hey, how many spaces can you give me in a year to a year and a half? And they're like, well, it's an excellent question. Who knows where we'll be in a year and a half? They're like, we'll be glad to sell them to you or loan them to you, but who knows what that will look like for us? So the point is, we're gonna have to be a little bit creative. We're gonna have to kind of shift our culture of getting to church and parking over the next 3 to 3.5 years. And we will, is there another one? No, okay. And we're just gonna have to love each other a little deeper. I had one of my peers graciously said, anything that has to do with parking in any way to get to church when we have lost one of our lots is going to make us better Christians. Whether it's the catechist coming in on a party bus or getting an Uber XL, parking and riding and sharing rides and carpooling, we're going to have to be a little bit creative. We're going to have to walk a little bit. We're going to have to talk a little bit. But we got to be a little creative. But I think we'll be okay. Am I forgetting anything? Okay, thanks. Do you need this?
That's good.
Thanks.
So I want to turn to questions of clarification, but to say a very brief word pastorally before we go there. Over the last almost 2 years, I would say there have been 3 kinds of voices of concern that have been raised about the project. One I might broadly categorize as we need every parking space that we can get all the time. We can't do without them ever. Please leave it just like it is. Another category of concern would be if we're going to develop the property, we need to do something that's more overtly about church work. We need to build a hospice there, or a nursing home, or a low-income housing tower, something that's more overtly about what we do. And a third area of concern that's been raised and was alluded to in Ellen's comments was that if you're going to develop the property, then you need to put it out on the market. You need to sort of let the market speak, define what you want, and ask builders to
to bid, in essence, make a bid on what's done. Ellen explained the path that was pursued and why. She also explained the vestry's intention to monetize, in essence, the property. That was the charge given to this committee. That commitment remains, very much so. And likewise, that in the monetizing of the property, they think of themselves as endowing, in a sense, the care and upkeep of the cathedral, so enabling the annual budget to do the kind of work it's meant to do with respect to mission. But those are, just to name them, are three, I would say, even standing concerns that have been named in the congregation, but with broad intent among members of the vestry and members of the congregation who've been responding to see us proceed with the plan that's before us. So this is a time for questions of clarification, detail on the presentation that Ellen has made, questions that have been prompted by it, or perhaps questions that experts on the panel could address for us. Yes?
I saw the stat said 80 spaces once the parking garage is built on Lot C.
Yes.
Loss of 5, but you have 65 spaces in Lot A, which the building is going to go on. So that seems like a lot more than a net loss of 5 spaces.
So actually, the net plus or minus has only to do with the lot over there as opposed to the whole campus. And how this is developed, so these are really two different matters. How this campus is developed, as we heard 2 weeks ago, is very much still up for architects and the congregation to be about. Whether or not that includes, for example, additional parking, whether that for example, a parking garage of some sort there, that remains to be seen. That's not been in the plans that have been put forward so far, but also we haven't yet hired the architect of record.
But what's the bottom line? How much money will the parking lot C bring in annually after everything's been completed?
So I think the first year's annual payment starts in at right around $300,000. And then every 5 years, as was presented, there's a 7.5% increase. So the first, there's a schedule of payments that accompanies the ground lease that might show the first 20 years or so with payments that were annually under $500,000, and the last 20 years with those increases, annual payments that are in excess of $2 million. Thank you for that. Yes, John, questions?
One question of clarification. I had seen in the description now that it's a mixed-use project, and it says hotel condo. I had heard some discussion that there may be street-level retail. Can you confirm whether that is or isn't the case, because that would put additional risks on parking?
Let me just repeat the question for the video, and just please know we videotaped 2 weeks ago and are videotaping today. For those who can't be here, they could be able to go to the website and see this. The question is the questioner has heard there's a possibility of street-level retail that might be required, and the presentation only showed mixed-use, condo, hotel, and parking. Anyone on the committee that can speak to that? Would you, Bergen?
I think the plan
Speak to a microphone, or here you go.
The plan does include some street-level retail. And I need to verify this, but I think downtown code is you cannot build just front-facing parking all the way down. You have to have street-level retail or hotel lobby or some kind of occupied space.
Can you say anything more about whether that would also face 8th Avenue, the sort of the side that the church's parking would come in and out of? 9th, excuse
Avenue.
me, thank you.
I don't believe there is anything facing 9th Avenue.
Just
I
check.
think it's just the main access is on 9th Avenue.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Please, John.
Are we making too much of parking issues? Aren't there successful downtown churches throughout the country that don't have a whole lot of parking?
Well,
Boston Trinity?
Sure. The question is being asked, are we making too much of parking in general? Aren't there successful downtown churches with little parking. Certainly that's true, and for many of our years at Christ Church, that was true, the middle part of our history. And there's much speculation among developers about what the parking needs over the next 25 years are going to be. So it could be, but certainly we know today that there are occasionally times when, and maybe even some of you in the home, I know I get the emails on Monday morning, when you come and circle the property and then drive home because you were still looking for parking. I believe that the work that Ellen has done making parking spaces, identifying them within about a 10-minute walk of the cathedral, does make parking available even today for everyone. So I believe that we can do this parking-wise. Was John back here?
Two questions. What happens at the end of this month when the letter of intent expires? Is there going to be another extension? I just saw a slide that said it had been extended through May 31st.
I want to speak to sort of the what's next. I can do that now, unless there are other pressing questions about clarification.
Timothy, I can say something about the street level.
Street level, more on street level.
I sort of blew past this, but this is an artist's rendering. We can't say that it's going to be exactly like this, but this is 9th Avenue. This, of course, is the Southern Baptist building right behind us. I'm sorry, 8th Avenue.
I said
Commerce. So we're back behind this building, back behind, Southern Baptist. Broadway would be over there somewhere. So presumably this is where the retail would be on the street level on 8th and not on 9th. It's our understanding that the only thing that would open onto 9th is our parking.
There's also a face on Commerce.
And a face, okay. Bergen says there would be a face, yes. So they would have this corner for potential retail, but their parking access is exclusively off of 8th. And is it that opening right there, Bergen? Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it from an extreme angle, so that would be the case. And the allusion was also made to the cost of our parking, of our owning the parking, which is $30,000 per space with straight line amortization over 30 years, which is why after the first 30 years of the lease, our rent goes up substantially.
I want to stay with John because John was here previously.
My second question is, and it falls squarely into your third category of concern.
Yes.
But if we haven't put this project out to bid,
Yes.
how do we know that we've negotiated the most favorable financial terms?
So why don't you speak to comparables and the conversation around that and the advice that we've gotten from other real estate folks in town? I'm sorry. The questioner asks, how do we know that we've gotten, in essence, sort of a fair price for the current letter of intent with HRI?
John, the first thing I'm going to do is quote Walker Matthews, who gave me permission to. Walker said in the Finance Committee meeting early on, every real estate deal is just the best you could do at that date and time. And he said, only time will tell whether it makes you look like a genius or like a fool. But it was his opinion at the time that we'd gotten a fair deal. We did do our homework, of course. The comparables I do know of in this neighborhood for land. There are different comparables if you're buying a building, particularly if that building is an income-producing building, and those tend to go for more per square foot. But land in our immediate vicinity, the Gannett property went for $128.30 a square foot. Our price is $250. Which is the Tennessean. Yeah, right, the Tennessean property, the Gannett property. We're getting $250 a square foot. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you. The Lifeway property that's now being developed went for $191.32 a square foot, and the former Nissan dealership on Broadway went for $219.73. So the Lifeway property was sold in January of 2015. The Gannett property, the Tennessean property in February of this year, and the Nissan property in August of 2017. So based on those land prices, we are getting considerably more. I also know that we feel like, and at the time that we entered into this, we were initially offered $125 a square foot, and we negotiated to a price of $250 a square foot. There were some properties in sort of the larger Nashville area downtown that had sold for a bit more than that, I think, at the time, but not since then.
I've got Becca in line. I see Fielding.
That's my understanding.
But I also want to make sure John doesn't have a follow-up. Go John, Fielding, Becca.
Those comps are for sales. but
Correct.
Deal is a lease. So,
Correct.
have you translated, the numbers been translated?
I don't have comparable lease figures, but I do know these came from Barry Smith, who sent them to me Friday.
Did he include this AEG parcel that is right next door to us that went for $260 a square foot? That is, a really, really incredible comp. The Gannett property was, bits and pieces and slices, and I don't understand why he would have not mentioned. But if you got fresh comps on Friday, I don't understand why he would not mention that if he did not.
Are there others on the committee to speak to that? Please, Bergen.
Fielding, that's a good question. The AG property was bought by Lifeway. So the basis for Lifeway that Ellen referenced is that was a resale. So does the 260 include full infrastructure? What is in that deal? I don't know. Because they are clearing that at high cost for demolition and everything else. And that is a good comp. It's right across the street from us at $10 higher than what we are. That's true. But by the way, the market is very dynamic and changes all the time.
Thank you.
Very fast. So if we were relying on stuff from 2015, that would give me great concern because it's moving and advancing so quickly.
Good.
Well, the 2018 price is the lowest of the three comps that we have. The Gannett price.
I would just refer to the AEG property at 260, which is the highest and the most recent.
You don't want to argue that singularly that's the important one for us to factor in here.
I just can't. I'm disappointed that it was not referenced here as a comp. I'm surprised it wasn't.
Becca, and then Charlie.
I know it's hard to imagine this, but let's say in 50 years, we no longer need those spaces for parking, just because of the way things are going. Would we have the right to then use that space in other ways?
For Brooks to speak to, please. The question is, if in 50 years, this is again for the benefit of the video, if in 50 years' time the church no longer had need for parking, would the church have the possibility of repurposing that space, those 80 spaces?
And the answer is yes. And what they actually have done, which is kind of interesting, is what you're doing with parking, and this, you're seeing this all around, is, in parking garages, they'll be sloped. Well, you can't repurpose sloped parking. But if you have a stub, which is what we've got here, you can repurpose that, you can rebuild, and you can just have a floor. And so I think that could actually benefit us quite a bit in the future if we don't need parking.
Charlie.
We give up some value by keeping 80s parking.
It's true. It's true. And having control over that.
We look at comps and factor that aspect into it.
It's true. Don, one more, and then I have a word for us.
I'm wondering about the comps that were lower, like Gannett and all. What was calculated out of the cost of tearing down the building? I mean, is it lower per square foot because they would have to tear down the building?
That's something we need Barry for here. We need to have him here.
I can't answer that question, Don. But know that with a 99-year lease, we reap income from this. It's not just a matter of a straight-out sale. And most of those others were straight-out sales. There are a bunch of questions, Timothy.
Please.
Along the line of your second point, I'm wondering when we say, like, they might do affordable housing, can we
The vestry has a desire to do the right thing. It has not been written in the LOI to date. We've been in conversation in an ongoing way with HRI about that. And if they were to elect not to use the low-income housing credits, it would be then a matter before the vestry. In essence, would you tithe from income? Would you have those kinds of discussions about what to do to address the question in the city?
So it's not included in what we might sign tomorrow?
That's correct. Part of what made HRI attractive in some sense was their historic work with low-income housing credits. Yes, one more, and then Ken.
Just one last question for me. The LOI has been extended at least a couple of times at this point. To the point that was made earlier, the market is very dynamic. There are market terms within that LOI. Have any of those terms, such as rent escalators or anything like that, been revised during the extension process?
They've been addressed once with respect to the value of parking. The rent escalator from the very beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Brooks, has stayed the same. The rent escalator part has not changed. And of course, from first conversation and first LOI, the valuation of the property changed once.
I would only request if you guys continue to visit that. Obviously, interest rates are probably the most dynamic portion of the market at this time.
Great. One more question, then a final. Yes, Ken.
I have two things to say. One is on tax credits. Tax credits are issued by the state of Tennessee. They're issued once a year. You have to bid on them. The bidding process starts in February because you don't get awarded until March. So they don't actually know they can get them or not. You're not just handed them. Being an out-of-state company, you have to almost joint venture with a local. You could non-profit with that part of it, and that's a possibility to do a lease for non-profit so the church could do something like that. Very difficult legal, but it can be done. The second thing is, I'm chairman of the property committee, and I want this to go through because we have so much deferred maintenance that we have been putting off for years. We need the income to offset this. And with the new potential of this building being renovated and added to, this is a significant boost to what we're going to be doing with that. So just let you know that.
Our Diocesan Property and Budget Committee needs to give Christ Church Vestry permission to encumber the property. They've had a presentation before them for the last 6 months, and after review yesterday afternoon, granted permission for the cathedral's vestry to encumber the property for the purposes of this ground lease. They had the particulars of this agreement to enter into a ground lease and ground lease before them. So that piece of it has been satisfied. However, our third-party partnership working group is burning the midnight oil in negotiating the final details of a agreement to enter into a ground lease. The major pieces remain in place, but a few questions, for example, about exterior review are still in place, and those need to be finalized before this matter can be put before the vestry. The vestry could act pending resolution of those matters, but in fact, as John mentioned, on May 30th, the ground lease, the LOI, letter of intent as it stands, expires. It expires if there's an imagination, both on the part of this group and HRI, that those outstanding questions can be satisfactorily resolved. It might be extended, but only if that were the hope. At this point, I think it was the beginning of this month and then in March, each time when the letter of intent was renewed, there needed to be some hope that those matters could be resolved. So the vestry will either have a document before it tomorrow to act on. It's met once and received a first reading on that. Or there'll be matters yet to be resolved, and we'll see what happens between now and May 30th. That's where things stand. May 31st, excuse me. Didn't mean to be off by a day. That's important. I invite you all to pray for these folk up front here who've really worked very, very hard, burnt the midnight oil over the last 2 years to to bring this to fruition. Pray for the many who will yet be involved in making a decision, and pray for our common life, that we'll know the right thing and have the courage to do it. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.